Hi there. Good morning. Chill out, Bill. You don't have to be here for this. All right. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to frame the context of this video. Everything shared here is for educational and informational purposes. This channel is dedicated to exploring ideas, historical documents, and perspectives in a thoughtful, analytical, and open-ended way. At times, I may read directly from source materials, books, documents, or archived texts verbatim. This is done intentionally to preserve accuracy and provide full context, not to promote or endorse the viewpoints expressed within them. Some of the material discussed may be controversial or uncomfortable. It is presented for the purposes of examination, discussion, and critical thinking. I do not condone or support hate speech, discrimination, or bigotry of any kind. The inclusion of certain materials does not reflect my personal beliefs, but is presented for examination and discussion. I encourage you to listen with a discerning mind, think critically, and come to your own conclusions. With that said, let's get into it. Since YouTube has taken off several of my videos, I will need to be rereading that material. If you want to join me for that, that's cool. But I also need to get going on Rumble. I already have a channel there. I certainly don't have an audience there, but if you don't see me here anymore, go find me there. Let me see, actually. I don't know if I have signed into it since I've re-downloaded the app. Nope, let's see if I can still sign in. Yep. Oops. I don't know if it's my no username. Dang it. Password, but no username. Apple. Let's sign in with Apple. Continue. All right. Sorry, we're doing it live. Nope, I'll have to create a new one. So I'll do that with you guys. Hi there. Hi, Kate. Okay. So with all that being said, this is for entertainment purposes. This is for educational purposes. We're going to continue with chapter 6. If you are just now joining me, I have a link so that you can get the book if you'd like to. Also, you can go start with chapter 1 in the playlist. Hopefully these will stick around. If not, I'll have to reread them because I haven't stored them anywhere except for YouTube. And I thought my little teeny measly channel wouldn't have trouble like this, but here we are. Hi. Hi, Ricky. Hi, you guys. Welcome. Let's get into this. All right. Frankfurt School. One of the organizations directly linked to the cybernetics group was the Institute for Social Research, ISR, but popularly known as the Frankfurt School. For example, Paul Lazarsfeld, the director of the radio project, was one of the invitees to the Macy's conference. Also on hand was Max Horkheimer, the head of the Frankfurt School, famous for his work in critical theory. Quote, in May of 1944, the American Jewish Committee established a Department of Scientific Research, which was headed by Frankfurt School director Max Horkheimer. Horkheimer established a project called Studies in Prejudice, with generous funding from the AJC and other agencies, including the Rockefeller Foundations. Let me ask a side question. I uploaded a short today. I tagged it. It shows the whole spiel. I think I'll have to go through and edit the videos to include that so that YouTube, when they come through and scan my video to see if I'm promoting hate speech. Were you able to see that? I don't know if it shows like an upcoming event and then gives you a trailer at the beginning. I'm not sure how to include that. You saw it? Awesome. Awesome. Cool. All right. The most significant of the 5 studies in prejudice produced for the AJC during the 40s and 44 through 50 was the authoritarian personality. Authors Adorno, Else, Frankel, Brunswick, Levinson, and Sanford assembled a large research team from the Berkeley Public Opinion Study and the International Institute of Social Research to conduct thousands of interviews of Americans to profile their allegedly deep-seated tendencies towards authoritarianism, prejudice, and anti-Semitism. Dr. William Morrow, the leading protege of Dr. Kurt Lewin, was one key bridge figure between the Frankfurt School and the Tavistock Institute, was a research director for the Authoritarian Personality Project. The authors of The Authoritarian Personality let it all hang out in the concluding chapter of the book, in which they summarized their findings and spelled out their recipe for social transformation. This is an excerpt. It seems obvious that the modification of the potentially fascist structure cannot be achieved by psychological means alone. The task is comparable to that of eliminating neurosis or delinquency or nationalism from the world. It's interesting that being patriotic is considered neurosis or delinquency. These are products of the total organization of society and are to be charged only as that society is changed. Are to be changed only that society is changed. I'm sorry. I'm going to get warmed up here. I'm still a little frazzled by the way YouTube has taken down my stuff. They're like, you can go edit it, but it's gone. There's nothing I can click on to edit. I'm glad you saw it, Kate. Awesome. I wonder if it will save it as a whole product here. Hey, shh. You don't have to worry about the neighbors. Just lay down. So, these are products of the total organization of society and are to be changed only as that society is changed. It is not for the psychologist to say how such things are to be brought about. The problem is one which requires the efforts of all social scientists. All that we would insist upon is that in the councils or roundtables where the problem is considered and action planned, the psychologist should have a voice. We believe that the scientific understanding of society must include an understanding of what it does to people, and that it is possible to have social reforms, even broad and sweeping ones, which though desirable in their own right, would not necessarily change the structure of the prejudiced personality. For the fascist potential to change, or even to be held in check, there must be an increase in people's capacity to see themselves and to be themselves. This cannot be achieved by the manipulation of people, however well grounded in modern psychology these devices of manipulation might be. It is here that psychology may play its important role. Techniques for overcoming resistance, developed mainly in the field of individual psychotherapy, can be improved and adapted for use with groups and even for use on a mass scale. I think back to all the times in my life where therapy was the only considerable answer to the problems I was having. And it's just not so. My goodness. The author concludes with this most revealing proposition. Quote, we need not suppose that appeal to emotion belongs to those who strive in the direction of fascism, while democratic propaganda must limit itself to reason and restraint. If fear and destructiveness are the major emotional sources of fascism, Eros belongs mainly to democracy. The cybernetics group. The Frankfurt School and their closest allies at Tavistock were the architects of both the cybernetics project and the counterculture project of the 1960s. In fact, the cybernetics group, sponsored by Josiah Macy's Foundation, was the umbrella under which the CIA and British intelligence conducted their mass experimentation with mind-altering psychedelic drugs, including LSD-25, which experiment was eventually spilled out onto the streets in San Francisco, New York's Greenwich Village, and every American college campus, giving us the counterculture paradigm shift of 1966 through 72. In 1965, one of the four directors of the Authoritarian Personality Project, R. Nevitt Sanford, wrote the foreword to Utopiates, the Use and Users of LSD 25, which was published by Tavistock Publications. I will come back to this later in the report. If you are to believe the official gloss, since 1930, the Josiah Macy's Foundation has devoted itself to the promotion of health and the relief of suffering. And it shows the Josiah Macy Foundation.org/about/history link. Are you correcting my pronunciation? Greenwich. Huh. Or what do you mean? See, I want to go on that website. If any of you want to, www.josiahmacyfoundation.org. Anyway, directing its support towards medical education and established programs supporting conferences and publications and those related to topics. The historian Jean-Pierre Dupuy describes the Macy's Foundation's role in the cybernetics group this way, quote, "Cybernetics was obliged from the beginning to ally itself with a movement, a political lobby, actually operating under the auspices of the Macy's Foundation, that sought to assure world peace and universal mental health by means of a bizarre cocktail concocted from psychoanalysis, cultural anthropology, and advanced physics." You're getting a little pushy, Miss Ma'am. It's too much. It's too much. Can you get off? Get off. Or lay down next to me. You're all up in my throat, Missy. Right there is fine. Boundaries. Lay down. I snap. Lay down. Nope. Lay down. So, that sought to assure world peace and universal mental health by means of a bizarre cocktail concocted from psychoanalysis, cultural anthropology, advanced physics, and the new thinking associated with the cybernetics group. Corporate media propaganda subsequently brainwashed the masses to believe that Macy's Foundation and figures such as Lazarsfeld and Wiener, Bateson, Mead, and Ashby were merely participants in social experiments to improve the quality of life through the hodgepodge merging of technology, evolution, and various social sciences. In reality, these individuals were lackeys for the foundation of the oligarchic world empire, Rockefeller, Josiah Macy, Russell Sage, and others. I am a little upset. But she's a basket case. She is always, if she gets on you, she has to force herself into your neck. And I know that like female wolves will do that to the males while they're getting fighty, because she's protecting my vulnerabilities. She's a good girl. I love it. She doesn't go running out into the street. They say that that's a big risky behavioral trait of border collies is they want to chase cars. They want to chase, but she's so good. I can take her. She's such a good travel dog. But she's not good in crowds because then she wants to nip at faces like they're cows or sheep or something, which sucks when I try to go pick up my kids and they want me to walk my dog up there. Because then she'll start getting nippy at the kids. And I'm like, oh, nope, we can't do that. Okay. Such as blah, blah, blah. In reality, these individuals were lackeys of the foundational. Okay. Less well known to the general public is that the Macy's Foundation has done more to harm America's social reality than any other single institution. During and immediately after World War II, the Macy's Foundation was utilized by a combination which included the British Secret Service, corrupt sections of American intelligence, plus treasonous members of the U.S. establishment to conduct a vast social experiment. The overall purpose of the experiment was to end the uncontrolled optimism of a population that had just won a world war and had started to rebuild the world, and instead to redirect that energy inward upon itself. 3 parts of that experiment became so successful that most people today think of them as some natural evolution of Western society, rather than as an unnatural deformation imposed from the outside. The sexual revolution of the late 60s and early 70s was decisively accelerated which decisively accelerated today's collapse of the nuclear family, could not have occurred in the form in which it did without the Macy's Foundation's single-handed sponsorship of the development and dissemination of oral contraceptives throughout the work of Harvard's Dr. Gregory Pincus. Pincus was studying reproduction, and the eugenicists at Macy's were studying how certain types of people should not be allowed to engage in reproduction. In 1954, Macy awarded Pincus a large special grant. In 1955, Pincus patented the pill. Similarly, the Macy's Foundation was a primary actor in creating the psychic revolution, thereby turning a post-war population that hitherto looked at sleeping pills with suspicion into today's America, which routinely takes a new drug for every new mood and prescribes psychoactive substances to its children by the millions of doses. And perhaps most importantly, it was the Macy's Foundation that helped to pervert American citizens' world-renowned sense of technological optimism into the now pervasive ideology of the information age. The Macy's Foundation and MK Ultra. The bizarre Macy's cocktail blend of the 1940s and early 50s became one of the primary covert funding conduits for the CIA through Macy's Foundation director Frank Fairmont Smith. I wonder if that has to do with the Macy's department store. You thought I was banned? Nope, they're just pulling my videos left and right. Yeah, I did just start. So you can stick around or come rewatch later. Let me know if you do come to rewatch, though. I wonder who all watches after the fact. I know I don't have many people who join me live, but anyway, yeah, you wonder, you'd bet if it has to do with the Macy's. Yeah, be a consumer while we study you in our department stores and otherwise. Anyway. Fremont Smith was very close to Dr. Harold Abramson, the CIA-linked psychiatrist and associated professionally with both Columbia University and Mount Sinai Hospital, whose LSD work had Macy's Foundation cover. One such individual was Dr. Louis Jolly West, then chair of UCLA's Department of Psychiatry and director of the Neuropsychiatric Institute. West was most famous as a CIA contract psychiatrist whose work on the MKUltra program in the 1950s involved feeding LSD to elephants. Aside from Dr. Abramson, a significant number of the Macy's Foundation conference members, such as Gregory Bateson, Margaret Mead, and psychologist Kurt Lewin, worked closely with the U.S. government during the Cold War under covert MKUltra drug brainwashing experiments, on the one hand, and psychedelic drugs as a means of social manipulation on the other. Another key participant in the Macy's conference was Donald Marquis, then a University of Michigan psychologist. Marquis helped organize basic research on the psychology of propaganda, on the nature of various national targets, and on various social groups within nations through MIT's Center for Group Dynamics, CGD. It inspired MIT's Group Networks Laboratory to study small group dynamics under the supervision of Alex Brevelis. No. It's okay. Lay down. That's fine. Her foot. Did you see it? Her foot. I'll start that sentence again. It's a long one. It would inspire MIT's Group Networks Laboratory to study small group dynamics under the supervision of Alex Brevelis, one of the top level advisors on Cold War secret operations for the Office of Naval Research, contracted out of MIT. This same MIT group later worked with the CIA to produce a major study of communist Chinese coercive persuasion techniques, more popularly known as brainwashing. Other Macy's studies, such as a sponsored study in cell biology, were actually analyzing techniques in eugenics or race science. Gosh, that sounds like critical race theory. Large amounts of grant money also went to what the foundation called psychosomatic interrelations. That is, quote, how psychological changes affect the mind and vice versa. Physiological changes. I need to get with it. That is how physiological changes affect the mind and vice versa. This was a cover for work on clinical techniques that would later be called brainwashing. The Macy's Foundation also provided financing and publicity for the British social engineer, Dr. William Sargent, whose 1957 book, Battle for the Mind, provided a how-to-do-it manual for mass brainwashing. No, ma'am. No. Lay down. Lay down. You want to hang out with me? You lay down. Don't push on me. Sargent, a specialist in shock trauma, spent 20 years in the United States working on the MKUltra project and other secret mind control efforts of the US and British governments. Eugenics. Throughout history, there have been those who, with an eye to specific political objectives, have used terror or the threat of terror against targeted populations. The scientific rationale for tyranny has always been attractive to the elites because it creates a convenient excuse to treat their fellow men as lower than animals. Eugenics, a crackpot notion of hereditary superiority and inferiority, originated in the 1880s and 1890s, spawned by a British network of families, including Darwin's cousin Sir Francis Galton, Thomas Huxley, Sir Arthur Balfour, the Cadbury and the Wedgwood families, as well as other late 19th century British Empire strategists linked to the Round Table movement of Cecil Rhodes and Lord Alfred Milner. They saw an opportunity to advance mankind towards a new dark age by taking the reins of Darwin's perversely racialist survival of the fittest, natural selection evolution theory, and applied social principles to develop social Darwinism. In the United States, the story of eugenics began in 1904 when the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory was started by prominent eugenicist Charles Davenport with the funding of leading American would-be oligarchs, the Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Harrimans. By 1910, the British had created the first network of social workers expressly to serve as spies and enforcers of the eugenics race cult that was rapidly taking over Western society. Hitler's English financial backers weren't the only ones sponsoring the eugenics research. In the 1920s, the Rockefeller family bankrolled the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Genealogy and Demography, which later would form a central pillar in the Third Reich. At the end of the war, with corpses still smoking across Europe, the Allies protected from prosecution, the very Nazi scientists, such as Joseph Mengele, who had tortured thousands of people to death. The Nazi radical brand of eugenics had embarrassed the Anglo-American social controllers, making eugenics and mental hygiene dirty words. The controllers, however, wouldn't be deterred. Quote, in 1956, the British Eugenics Society decided in a resolution that the society should pursue eugenics by less obvious means. This means Planned Parenthood and the environmentalist movement. Every population control policy was simply renamed as they continue their work under the protection of the United Nations and its associate organizations. The Eugenics, Euthanasia, and Mental Hygiene Societies of Britain, America, and the rest of Europe was simply renamed the more palatable Mental Health Association of Great Britain, National Association of Mental Health of the United States, which later became the World Federation of Mental Health. I will come back to them later in this section. Eugenics Quarterly magazine became Social Biology, and the American Birth Control League became Planned Parenthood, which today is responsible for a massive depopulation in Africa. It is not widely known for some of the greatest, it is not widely known that some of the largest aid agencies and U.S. Christian fundamentalist groups have been covertly running in Africa over the past several decades. Its banner is family planning, which is turned on its head when one understands the real implications of the far-reaching objectives. Shh! Don't interrupt. It's rude. It's rude. You know, that Christian fundamentalist front has been used, and I feel like that's what TPUSA is doing also. Please lay down, or you get off. You choose. Lay down or get off. Choose. Lay down or get off. Look at her face. Isn't she cute? You sweet. Lay down. Lay down. Lay down. There it is. Good girl. That's a good girl. Hi, Mary. Welcome. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is the stuff, though. This is the stuff that got me pissed off about the last election. Like, you think we should only be voting about abortion? All right. Eugenics Quarterly magazine became Social Biology. I already read this. Christian fundamentalist. Yep. Let me find my place. I'm sorry. We're 28 minutes in. Its banner is family. Yeah, its banner is family planning, which is turned on its head when one understands the real implications and far-reaching objectives. These family planning policies are vigorously and consistently advocated by major bilateral donors, such as the U.S. government through its surrogate, USAID, and multilateral agencies, most notably the International Planned Parenthood Foundation, IPPF, the UN Fund for Population Activities, UNFPA, and the World Bank in Africa. The World Bank, since the 1960s, has been the leading foundation entity of population control, with annual spending skyrocketing from a paltry $2.7 million in 1969 through 70 to over $4.5 billion by 2006. World Bank presidents Eugene Black and Robert McNamara were at one time trustees of Rockefeller-controlled Ford Foundation. Quote, more significantly, population control policies have now become a key condition required for the disbursement and structural adjustment loans by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund within the framework of their structural adjustment programs. SAP conditions, structural adjustment programs, typically include, in addition to devaluation, liberalization and privatization of the national economies and of the health and education sectors, population control policies. Thus, preparation of the population policy statement is a typical condition for the disbursement of a SAP, which is probably why Bill Gates started in on that, because he realized he could get more money that way. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool that he eradicated malaria in Africa, but then that was just a cover. That was just a front, because he said, quote, with vaccines, we can get the population down. All right. Good to see you, Constance Bailey. Super big cover story. Oh, Melinda got wise. I think she should write a memoir, tell-all. Betsy Hartman, director of the Population and Development Programs at Hampshire College, coined a new term for such policies: Malthusian ecofascism, MEF. She notes that the international aid community currently concentrates its population control efforts in sub-Saharan Africa, and family planning becomes the number one priority. The overriding imperative of these internationally generated programs is to reduce population growth as fast and cost effectively as possible. As she rightly observes, in much of Africa, where AIDS threatens tragic human and demographic consequences, the present emphasis on population control and defunding of health systems amount to indirect triage. Needless to say, Africa is not the only continent where these brutal policies are enacted. In 1972, in an effort to deal with the so-called population emergency in India, the World Bank funded a $21 million project, which resulted in millions of involuntary sterilizations and thousands of deaths. That's staggering. The confluence of eugenics, Nazis, environmentalists, and the One World Company enthusiasts also converge through a secretive 1001 club, 1001 club, comprised of the most ancient and powerful families of Europe, who finance covert Malthusian operations of the WWF in Africa. One such operation run by WWF, for example, was called Operation Lock, ostensibly to save the black rhino in South Africa. I want to, side note, I was reading in here about Operation Artichoke. It wasn't in, what was it, the first or second chapter, where the MK Ultra program kind of splintered off, and it was often an Operation Artichoke. I just saw something about it. Oh yeah, Tulsi just declassified Operation Artichoke. So I'm gonna have to dig into that. Maybe you can with me. Yes, ma'am. It is. The devil is real. And it dresses in human clothes. $1 billion suits. Hi, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here live. Some places you're Lisa, right? I've met a lot of you through your screen names, and I just want to make sure that I remember your names. And I'm so bad at names. Yes, Tulsi, my goodness. Good to see you, Miss Ma'am. Yes. All right. Operation Lock. That's another one to look into. All right. Operation Lock, ostensibly, nope. John Hanks, WWF's Africa director, financed a team of retired British SAS commandos to infiltrate and sabotage so-called poaching rings through an outside paramilitary force, instigating black-on-black violence between the African National Congress and Inkatha Freedom Party by carrying out targeted acts of violence. And that the front was the Black Rhino cause. So like in June 18th of 92, the Bio Patong massacre. No, the Boy Patong. I'm sorry. I have a little bit of dyslexia. It shines through when I read out loud. So the massacre caused the National the African National Congress to walk out of the initial formal negotiations to end apartheid, accusing the ruling National Party of complicity in the attacks. The goal was to trigger a bloody civil war and prevent the end of the apartheid system and the reintegration of South Africa into the world community. WWF and its direct action terrorist arm, Greenpeace, as well as like-minded groups, are not just some lunatic fringe that can easily be ignored. Gosh, I used to be so gung-ho for Greenpeace. But I grew up in the 90s, and that was all you saw. They were the social warriors in the propaganda of the 90s. Okay, as well as like-minded groups are not just some lunatic fringe that can easily be ignored. They are the shock troops of the oligarchy in their fight against humanity. And Craig, if you're still on, was it you who asked about? Nope, it was somebody else. Asked about the Sykes in my post of John Mappin's texts between him and Charlie Kirk, and he was talking about the Sykes that were everywhere. And I was like, I think they're similar to the shocks they're referring to in this, the shock troops of the oligarchy. So Malthusian law, similar to what was proposed for the UN in 1994 Cairo Population Conference, is a theory in demography regarding population growth developed during the Industrial Revolution on the basis of the writings of Thomas Malthus, the famous 1798 quote on population. So I wonder if that was a book or like an article or like a chat book or something, which was nothing more than a plagiarized version of Venetian monk Gia Maria Ortez's 1790s publication, Riflessioni sulla popolazione delle nazioni. Dang it. I hate it when they make me read Italian titles. According to his theory, population expands faster than food supplies. Ortez is the intellectual author upon which the genocidal 1994 UN Cairo Population Conference draft was based. Most people may find all of this mind-boggling at the very least, but the cultural heroes from the bygone era, such as Margaret Mead, the Huxley brothers, and the late Carl Jung, chief promoter of the collective racial unconscious, not only attended conferences year after year with the Nazi doctor responsible for some of the most heinous crimes against the human race, but wholeheartedly supported every theory which brought on the Nazi Holocaust against humanity. Carl Jung, really? Really? I might have to dig into him next. For example, Jung was an editor in the pre-war years of German Journal of Psychotherapy, and Dr. M.H. Göring, Hermann Göring's cousin and a participant in a T4 euthanasia project, the elimination of 400,000 mental patients in German institutions. I love him too. I don't know if this is for real in his background, but it checks out. He's got it cited. I don't know how I can say it checks out only because he cites his material, but I think I need to dig into that material myself. Yeah, I'll have to get in there. We'll have to go there together. So, World Federation of Mental Health is a perfect example of this confluence of Rockefeller, CIA, Tavistock apparatus. Reese, an anthropologist, Margaret Mead, behavioral scientist Lawrence K. Frank, Josiah Macy, executive Fremont Smith, and German sociologist Max Horkheimer were all in Paris together in the summer of 1948 to launch the WFMF, World Federation of Mental Health. Although he had died the previous year, Kurt Lewin had been involved in the preparations for launching the federation through his involvement under Frank in the National Committee for Mental Hygiene and the London-centered International Committee for Mental Hygiene, with a half dozen cybernetics group members on its board. Both bodies oversaw a network of 4,000 psychiatric shock troops, in Rees's words, who would be at the heart of worldwide social engineering apparatus, penetrated into every community. Margaret Mead and Lawrence K. Frank, two pillars of the cybernetics group, authored the founding statement of Rees's World Federation of Mental Health. Both Mead and Fremont Smith would later succeed Rees as president, which they titled Manifesto of the First International. Mead and Fremont Smith bluntly wrote, "The goal of mental health has been enlarged from the concern for the development of healthy personalities to the larger tasks of creating a healthy society. The concept of mental health is coextensive with world order and world community. There are three dominant features of WFMH's manifesto. Firstly, Rees stressed the need to apply World War I and World War II military psychiatric experiences as a paradigm for a system of community mental health clinics, through which counterinsurgency psychiatrists could forcibly administer therapy to large population groups. Another key point is in the manifesto stressed the need of placing psychiatrists in key positions, which would allow them to play determinate roles in administrative and social programs of government and industry. As investigator L. Marcus wrote back in 1974, one should not be astonished that the late George Orwell conceived his 1984 novel after a period of exposure to a group of Rees's followers. Launched by the Cybernetics Group in 1948, the World Federation of Mental Health was among the nastiest projects launched by the world's leading sociologists, psychiatrists, and anthropologists. To say all that, I had to swallow my spit so I didn't spit on film. The so-called psychiatric shock troops, whose first president, Brigadier General John Rawlings Rees, was the director of the Tavistock Institute, Britain's premier psychological warfare center. Carl Jung was elected vice president, and another individual closely associated with WFMH. One second. Another individual closely associated with WFMH was the Nazi doctor Werner Villinger, who sat on the White House Conference on Children and Youth in the United States in the 1950s. For as much as Jung's supporters would like to deny it, there is no bending the facts. Jung was not confused about whom he was backing, Hitler and the Nazis. Yeah, right, though. I don't want to believe that. Meanwhile, immediately after the war, Sir Julian Huxley changed the name of their program to enforce birth control, zero economic growth, and the technology of mass mind control, and continued to apply the principles which created Nazi Germany's mass murder against the racially unfit. In 1946, Huxley announced that even though it is quite true that any radical eugenics policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, it will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenics problem is examined with the greatest care, that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake, so that much of In 1946, I'm starting over. It's a real long sentence. In 1946, Huxley announced that even though it is quite true that any radical eugenics policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, it will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenics problem is examined with the greatest care, and that the public mind is informed of these issues at stake, so that much that now is unthinkable may at least become thinkable. In 1974, Henry Kissinger, Huxley's intellectually sodomized son, said, "Depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the Third World." Huxley was a founder of the British Eugenics Society, first Director General of UNESCO, which pushed for population reduction, and what Huxley called a single culture for the world. He was also a leading member of the WFMH, director of the Abortion Law Reform Association, and founder of the World Wildlife Fund, whose first president was the former card-carrying Nazi Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, and one of the organizers of the Bilderberg meetings since its inception in 1954. Few realized that Huxley represented a social set of miscreants, the likes of which had not been seen since. Amongst them was his grandfather, Thomas Huxley, whose outspoken support of Charles Darwin's degenerate theory of evolution earned him the nickname Darwin's Bulldog. His personal mentor and Satanist, Aleister Crowley, the aforementioned Brigadier John Rawlings Rees, Bertrand Russell, and H.G. Wells. And I love H.G. Wells also. Whose open conspiracy was a call for fascist imperial world dictatorship. What makes the open conspiracy open is not the laying out of some secret master plan, not the revealing of the membership roster of some inner sanctum of the rich and powerful, but rather the understanding that ideas, philosophy, and culture control history. Ain't that the truth? And now they're controlling our ideas and what we talk about. And I'm still pissed about that. YouTube did me dirty. That's okay. Oh, Ricky, I love how you're on top of the comment section. Oh my. Nope. Also involved, Julian's brother Aldous of the Brave New World fame. In Aldous Huxley's book, the population is genetically divided into alphas, betas, all the way down to the synthetically produced epsilon morons through the application of eugenics or Nazi breeding laws. Over the years, the WFMH itself became a huge clearinghouse of psychological warfare profiles used by British and American intelligence services during the Cold War. A typical Macy's WFMH joint project was the Conference on Problems of Health and Human Relations in Germany, a series of high-level 1950 through 51 meetings designed to convince German social scientists and healthcare providers that the Frankfurt School's bogus authoritarian personality profile should be relied upon in dealings with German patients. New terms like transhumanism, population control, sustainability, conservation, bioethics, and environmentalism replaced the now outdated racial hygiene and social Darwinism, and in the process prepared public opinion, medical education, and government policy to discard the notion of the sanctity of human life. Except that, as investigative journalist Rob Ainsworth explains, quote, "The environmentalist movement is anything but the grassroots movement it pretends to be. The biggest and most influential groups receive tens of millions of dollars in funding every year, and the boards of trustees and directors reflect this. From Survival International to United Nations Environment Program, from World Watch Institute to International Food Policy Research Institute, from World Resources Institute to Greenpeace, the Nature Conservancy and Swiss-based International Union, for the conservation of nature, and the UN Development Program to the Natural Resources Defense Council and Environmental Defense are all run by bankers, hedge fund managers, and big oil. As Club of Rome wrote in its 1991 publication, The First Global Revolution, the enemy is humanity itself. Golly, what a... Yeah. All right, transhumanist agenda. And I think this one was a faster chapter. We may finish this today. We will. And I think chapter 7 is the last one. Yep. One more on this book, and we'll have to decide together what we're reading next. All right. Another area of globalist agenda is transhumanism. As I explain in Transevolution, the coming of age of human deconstruction, transhumanism is an ultra-high-tech dream of computer scientists, philosophers, neuroscientists, and many others. It seeks to use radical advances in technology to augment the human body, mind, and ultimately the entire human experience. It is the philosophy that supports the idea that mankind should proactively enhance itself and steer the course of its own evolution. Transhumanists wish to become what they call post-human. A post-human is someone who has been modified with performance-enhancing body and brain augmentations. Neuralink, anybody? To the point that they could no longer call themselves human. They have mutated themselves into an altogether new being. Many people have trouble understanding what the true transhumanism movement is all about and why it's so awful. After all, it's just about improving our quality of life, right? Or is transhumanism about social control on a gigantic scale? In fact, social control is exactly how powerful American foundations, such as the Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie Endowment, and Macy's Foundation, see it. The ability to make machines act like humans, and the ability to treat humans as machines. The final accomplishment of H.G. Wells' old Fabian goal of a scientific world order, where everything is as neat as a differential equation, and unpredictable things such as human creativity never mess things up. It's crazy to hear somebody so artistic and profound say something like that. To most people, this sounds like something from a science fiction film. Few are aware of constant breakthroughs in technology, which makes the transhumanist vision a very real possibility for the near future. For example, neurochip interfaces, computer chips that connect directly to the brain, are being developed right now. The ultimate goal of the brain chip would be to increase intelligence thousands of times over, basically turning the human brain into a supercomputer. It already is, though. It already is. It's a quantum computer, our brains. Lifelong emotional well-being is also a key concept within transhumanism. This can be achieved through a recalibration of the pleasure centers of the brain. Pharmaceutical mood renderers have been suggested, which will be cleaner and safer than the mind-altering drugs. The goal is to replace all aversive experience with pleasures beyond the doubts of normal human experience. Nanotechnology, for example, is a pivotal area concerning transhumanists. It is the science of creating machines the size of molecules. Such machines could create organic tissue for medical use. This was written a decade ago, and people are talking about it being what we were administered in the COVID vaccine. You know, as fictitious as that sounds, I've seen some pretty staggering robotics technology under a microscope where it can gather together and then move like an inchworm and stuff. Have you seen that? Gosh, where was I? the size of molecules, such machines could create organic tissue for medical use. Using this type of technology could dramatically prolong the lifespan. The Global Future 2045 International Congress predicted that by 2045, it will be possible to live forever, combining technology and biology into an event called the singularity. Oh my goodness. The singularity would occur at the point in which artificial intelligence surpasses the capabilities of the human brain. From cyborgs with very long lifespans to downloading consciousness into a machine. Transhumanists say that it is possible to predict exactly what a posthuman will be, but that it will be better. Such lofty promises are being embraced by many people for a better world for everyone. No matter how you look at it, singularity is being promoted as the great solution to our 21st century global problems. And thanks to the Human Genome Project, we will soon be able to decode DNA itself through the use of applied genetics. Science will then be able to improve the human race. What most people don't realize is that this concept is not new. Transhumanism was born out of humanism, which is yet another clever disguise of scientism, created specifically so that global eugenics operations could be carried out without being noticed. Some experts say that soon it might be possible to live forever. Artificial intelligence, the creation of thinking robots, is closely related to the mind-machine merger concept of neurochips. There is a growing perception that machine parts will be added to human bodies to create cyborgs, a term invented by Dr. Nathan Klein, a psychiatrist linked to the CIA and MKUltra. He had co-written an article with Manfred Kleins for the September 1960 issue of Astronautics, entitled Cyborgs and Space, which first introduced the term cyborg into the English language. Still others believe that humanity will merge totally with technology by uploading individual consciousness to a virtual reality. Upon being uploaded, one could live forever within a computer-generated reality, leaving the physical body behind. In this machine, the individual could merge his intelligence with the collective intelligence of all others in the digital reality, effectively becoming one super intelligent being. This concept is popularly referenced to as the hive mind. How many people see the parallel with Jung's collective unconscious? Only through the recognition of the dimension of the collective unconscious can science serve the interests of man. Says Jung, except that virtual reality and computers cannot replicate human intelligent thought. What AI can do is to alter consciousness in the same way that LSD altered and degraded the human mind back in the 1960s. In the concluding chapters of Cybernetics, Wiener states the possibility of the future with learning capable, self-producing. Nope, I'm starting over that sentence. In the concluding chapters of Cybernetics, Wiener states the possibility of a future with learning capable, self-reproducing machines, much like that depicted by Arnold Schwarzenegger's cyborg in the apocalyptic movie Terminator. But like all computers or logical systems, all the decisions and policy of those machines will be nothing more than a logical deduction from a set of rules and axioms of its initial programmer. There is no possibility for discovery of a new universal principle of science because the actual principles of human knowledge are not confined to what is learned. As Johannes Kepler exhaustively explains in his The Harmonies of the World, the human personality has access by the unique nature of the human mind's unique power of cognition, unique among all living creatures. 1, 2, 3, 4 uniques, 3 uniques, to generate previously unknown, validatable, and universal physical and comparable principles. which increase our species' power in and over the universe per capita and per square kilometer of space. To annul this unique nature of human mind, the parallel world of Jungian thought can now be found intertwined in the ideas of the New Age. From beer commercials that talk about the collective unconscious to the Star Wars series and mass marketed virtual reality, we are consciously building on Jungian imagery. Are you telling me that he went to the bedroom? Don't. I can see. Thank you. We are consciously building on Jungian imagery and mystical ideas. To them, this new technology is the key to open the doors of perception to Jungian's dream world. However, this Jungian Star Wars dream world is more like a reoccurring nightmare. The most crucial epistemological issue is often overlooked. Do these Star Wars, Doom, and Lord of the Rings creatures look human to you? The second issue is, how do you corrupt people into Jungian mysticism? Obviously, by dehumanizing the image of man. Therein lies the principle of evil, pervading virtual consciousness. Am I exaggerating? Let's see. Quote, if you can generate enough stimuli outside one's sense organs to indicate the existence of a particular alternate world, then a person's nervous system will kick into gear and treat the stimulated world as real, says Jaron Lanier of VLP Research, Inc. Furthermore, if virtual reality technology is administered as a brainwashing tool, it can weaken what the Freudians call the superego, that part of the personality that coheres to one's moral consciousness or conscience, which is the basis for truth-seeking on the one hand, and the uniquely human act of fundamental discovery and integration of new universal principles, which have improved the lives of people per square kilometer of space against nature on the other. In fact, science has tried to drum up our built-in connection to the universe and replace it with consensual hallucination through virtual reality. Virtual reality, we're told, creates an artificial world in which we are free to do whatever we want without being accountable for our actions. If you want to have sex with the computer-generated image of your neighbor's dog, that's perfectly all right. Go ahead and have it in the virtual world. With the liberation of our repressed fantasies, if one is to believe Freudian claptrap, virtual reality produces a new consciousness that redefines good and evil. In other words, of that other famous psychopath, Friedrich Nietzsche, it is a universal beyond good and evil. Thus, we are liberated to do evil without suffering the effect of evil, and therefore purge ourselves of our innate desire to be evil. The fantasized pinnacle of transhumanist world provides us with the clearest view of its deadly ends, when seen through the eye of the physical world lacking universal truth and the sacred responsibility of the sovereign individual to act for the good. And without universal truth, there can be no reason. If truth is killed, then our civilization is killed with it. Transhumanist agenda in the entertainment industry. I knew this was coming when they were talking about mass social programming and mass psychotherapy. So, another key issue of transhumanism is the fostering of a particular agenda as the basis of forms of entertainment. A simple example of this can be found in numerous Hollywood films or television shows, which include robots or androids. They often make the viewer feel sympathetic towards the robot, and in turn, this makes them feel emotional. If, say, the robot were to be killed by a human, it's also worth noting that this is almost always a human causing these robots pain. Do you remember? It went viral there a few years back. There was a robot that was bleeding, and it was, I forget where, but it was constantly cleaning up after itself until it bled out and slowly died. And it took years for this to happen, but you sit and watch it trying to clean up its own blood spillage. That reminds me of this. Or this reminds me of that. For example, in The Terminator, the Short Circuit, which my kids just watched and loved. And this song that the gangsters in Short Circuit sing, "Los locos kick your ass into outer space." Sorry, I had to say that. So, for example, in Terminator and Short Circuit, this agenda is openly flaunted. The robotic characters in these films are shown to have good morals and human-like emotions throughout the entire movie. As a result, the viewer then becomes attached to and shows compassion for and sympathy for them. So how does it relate to the music industry? The universe and its composition are essentially made up of matter vibrating at different frequencies. In essence, the universe is made up of sound, and this includes us human beings too. Sound is widely used as a therapeutic tool and can alter mental and physical states of human beings. Music activates nearly... I'm drooling. Hang on a second. Sorry. Music activates nearly every region of the brain. The limbic system in the brain begins to fire when we have a variety of pleasurable experiences. That same network of neurons also fires when we listen to music that we enjoy. These neurons help to modulate levels of neurotransmitter dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters that eventually make you feel positive. So when you listen to music that you like, you get an actual change of chemical levels in your brain. And this is why the music industry is also being used to push the transhumanist agenda. By having nearly every region of the brain active, you become easily susceptible to psychological attacks. In this case, by your own favorite artists. There are numerous examples of transhumanist agenda being pushed in the music industry. Take Rihanna's live performance of Rude Boy, for example. On stage, she performs with real dancing robots. These robots have absolutely nothing to do with the song. The purpose of that dance routine is to make the viewers feel as if the robots are sentient beings. The whole idea of the transhumanist agenda is to make humans view inanimate objects and technology as being on the same level as a human being. Setting for a book, quote, "God of singularity springs out of a computer to rapture the human race. The math magicians of British intelligence calculate demons back into the dark, and solar scale computation just uploads us all into the happily ever after. The God is really just an artificial intelligence, just one of the plethora of post-humanizing changes and mimetic subcultures that are coming on fast and that most people don't know even exist." A cover of a well-known fashion magazine has a slimly clad young lady embracing a robot while meaningfully looking into his eyes. That's what sexualizing technology is all about. This agenda is not about the improvements of the human species, but rather about the manipulation of the human consciousness so that human beings no longer see themselves as human beings, but rather much like a piece of technology. By dehumanizing our species, we become the enemy. You may not realize it, but Tavistock has long used Hollywood and the music industry as two of its most potent tools in reaching out to the brainwashed masses in order to change the historical paradigm of society. The next time you look at an all-knowing grin of a Tavistockian degenerate, just remember that's what they are thinking about. We're done with chapter 6. An hour and 10 minutes in. Let me catch up in the chat. Right. Good wins over evil always. That we have to keep in mind. Mhm. But, I mean, how long constants? You said bodies do not replicate either, they reproduce. They're cloning us. They've been cloning for ages. That's why that was so controversial. Mhm. Short circuit. Circuit. Yeah, we love Wall-E too in this household. I remember Lost in Space, they did a revamp of that. Danger, Will Robinson. Yes. You know what? My kids love their VRs, and I think they're pretty cool too. In fact, um, they have a history school just launching for the VR where you can go in and talk to Abraham Lincoln or go visit historical sites and walk around in them. And I thought that was so cool. If only we could go back to the time where we didn't know too much. All right, you guys. Thanks for being here with me. Um, we have chapter 7 next in this book, and then I'll be done. I think I have a month left before we move. We can probably get through another book before then together. We'll have to pick it. I may pick it before we vote on one together. I also will need to reread the protocols so that I have a full playlist there, and maybe with the premise or the preface of my trailer that some of you saw while waiting for me to go live. Maybe they'll allow me to keep them up and I won't make so many comments, even though that's what I feel like makes it special. What we're doing here together is that we can talk about what we're reading. But if that's what gets it pulled off, you know, maybe, I don't know. But love to you guys. Thank you for being here with me. I'll see you tomorrow.